So that's a radio station in New York.
I think the gentleman's name is Tariq Ali.
Okay.
Okay.
And what was that second thing you wanted to bring up about Imus? I was telling
Well,
the people.
The issue we brought up last week about the jailed scholar who was, the case was brought against him. He got a life sentence for speaking, and there was a gun charge involved. But he got a life sentence in the state of Virginia, and his name was Al-Tamimi. And the prosecutors said that he hated the United States. Right? He hated the United States and set forth the idea that it should be destroyed, right? Which the prosecutor said that he's got a right to do, pursuant to our First Amendment right to free speech. But they said that he didn't have the right to incite violent acts, right? He didn't have the right to incite violence.
Well,
right?
well, that's very clear. Nobody does have that right.
Well, certain people...
It's against the law to incite riots, which is the same difference. So, but what was it you were saying last week that shows that there was a double sword here?
There's a double standard, because we spoke about the statements from Ann Coulter, how she called for a nuclear strike, a preemptive nuclear strike, an unprovoked attack against North Korea, saying that that would provide a lesson to other nations who maybe were not as sympathetic as some would like to U.S. interests and U.S. goals.
And you said something about Larry King had made a similar kind of violent call.
It was actually, Ann Coulter, it was Bill O'Reilly, yeah.
Bill O'Reilly, I'm sorry, Larry King.
Yeah, and then we spoke about, I've heard Larry King say some really horrible things, so we might not be, might not be so quick to apologize to Larry King. But, these are the types of statements. These people issue these statements with absolute impunity. I mean, here we have Ann Coulter calling...
But you haven't told the public what was it that Bill O'Reilly said specifically?
Okay, now last week's show, we did set forth that the United States had given the ultimatum to the Taliban government in the days after the 9/11 attacks, that they were to turn over Osama bin Laden or the U.S. would bomb and invade them, right? And the Taliban's response to that, we spoke about also that the Taliban's response was reasonable, that, show us your evidence that Osama bin Laden perpetrated this dastardly deed, and if your evidence is sufficient, then fine, we'll turn him over. We have no problem with that, but present your evidence, which the United States never did. They just rushed to war. The war planned decades ago, the Trans-Afghan pipeline. Dean Loren got into the details of that last week. Now, Bill O'Reilly said about that, he says his exact words were during his broadcast on September 17, 6 days after the attacks of 9/11, Bill O'Reilly, during his show on Fox News, said that if the Afghan government did not extradite Osama bin Laden to the United States, the U.S. should bomb the Afghan infrastructure to rubble, the airport, the power plants, the water facilities, and the roads. This is a very primitive country, and taking out their ability to exist day to day will not be hard. Remember, the people of any country are ultimately responsible for the government they have.
Oh, that's outrageous.
Meaning that without an investigation and without presenting evidence, whatever country U.S. leaders decide is the enemy of the day, right, without presenting their evidence, it gives them the right. Fox News apparently has the right to declare war on these countries and to advocate for the bombing and the attack with the emphasis being on starving the civilians, right? Starving the civilian population. O'Reilly goes on to say, the Germans were responsible for Hitler. The Afghans are responsible for the Taliban. He says we should not target civilians, but if they don't rise up against this criminal government, meaning the Taliban, he says they starve, period. So he's talking about launching an attack against the infrastructure, right? He used the term infrastructure, meaning not military targets.
Right.
The infrastructure, the water treatment facilities, the sewage, right? The sanitation system, the water purification system. The electrical generation system, which is connected because you can't purify the water without the electricity.
What a heartless statement to
But
make. You're killing people who don't believe in the war, who are very religious. You're killing women and children, and that's what Bill O'Reilly was
Openly advocating.
So this is wouldn't you say, Dean? Wouldn't you agree that this is inciting a riot? Now, why is this other guy in jail?
No, wait a minute. Before we get to that, I'll just quickly say you missed the gem in the rough. Because you see, Bill O'Reilly is also saying that the Afghan people are responsible for the Taliban. The German people were responsible for the Nazi
I get
government.
that.
But
That would mean we are responsible for Bush.
That is exactly right.
And that is absolutely not the truth. And I do hope the other countries understand that the Americans are furious with what's going on with this war, that most people do not want it. So why do we have people in power that are not listening to the people?
But this is the whole point. The gem is he's saying to the American people, take back your government. That's what you're not hearing Bill O'Reilly saying, that we as a people have a responsibility.
No,
and in fact, it's in the Constitution that when the government betrays us, we are to take back the power. That is expressly written in.
And how is it we would do that? We didn't vote for Bush. He voted in himself.
Well, I guess we'd have to incite a rally. We'd have to begin some type of aggressive type moves.
We have had major protests in Washington, D.C., where busloads of people came from all over the country. So what else could one do?
Well, we'd have to do exactly what the revolutionary residents of the Americas did. They'd have to pick up arms against the crown.
Be careful, I think I see the FBI knocking on the door.
Well, history says it all.
Yeah.
I think it's in the Declaration of Independence that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when the government, which is supposed to be the people's servant government, when the government becomes destructive to those ends, that we have the right to alter or abolish that government and institute new government, right? So it ties into the Tamimi case also, because he says that he didn't have the right. The prosecutor said, the U.S. attorneys that prosecuted the case against al-Tamimi, life sentence for speaking, they said that he had the right to say all of these things, but he didn't have the right to solicit treason.
But didn't you also say last week, which you're not mentioning this week, that there was a double standard to the term? What was the term that he was inciting people? You said it could be used for religious?
Well, jihad. He called for
jihad,
right? So there's jihad can have many meanings, both violent and nonviolent. But he actually called for violent action. He called for violent jihad. Yeah,
okay.
He called for not necessarily holy war. That is an incorrect understanding of the term. Jihad, we spoke about that a little last week, that it translates into the struggle against tyranny and oppression and injustice.
Well, I think you get the term holy war because, in fact, Iran is one of the few nations that does not have a secular government. They have a religious-based government, which was one of the fundamental blocks of why Israel supported Iran in the war against Iraq in the early 1980s, because Iran's religious government would lend justification to Israel having the only other, one of the few other religious governments in the West.